Time it is the practice of the Telegraph to serve up honest, unadulterated news entirely free from all social and religious bias. It is loyal to king and country, it loves liberty, it loathes licence. So said one of its columnists in the interwar years after the Telegraph took over a rival. The paper once again, of course, in the spotlight with a takeover plan proposed by a group of business people with Abu Dhabi connections and money. And now more than 100 MPs, mostly but not all Conservative, have signed a motion saying that is a bad plan and suggesting that Parliament should be given the power to block it. Let us talk to Robert Jenrick, the Conservative MP, former Cabinet Minister, of course, who is on the line. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What are the powers that you think ought to be given?
Well, we believe that freedom of the press is a fundamental bulwark of democracy, and that it is therefore very important that we protect our major national newspapers and media outlets from inappropriate control by foreign powers. In fact, there's no democracy anywhere in the world which has allowed a major national newspaper or media outlet to be taken over by another state. And so what we're proposing is that in addition to the existing powers that the government and the regulator have, if one wanted to do this, there would have to be a vote in Parliament. And this provides an additional check as a bulwark to freedom of the press.
Right. Two problems with that. The first is it's not being taken over by a state. According to those who are taking it over, it's been taken over by a lot of very respectable people, backed by a former boss of CNN, with legal things in place, they say, that keeps the state, Abu Dhabi, indeed the United Arab Emirates, out of it. And number two, of course, we've got plenty of newspapers, haven't we, that have been owned and indeed are owned by individuals, sometimes foreign individuals. Rupert Murdoch is an American citizen. So what is there to worry about?
Well, to take your second point first, you're right to say that there is a very long history of newspapers and media organisations being owned by foreign individuals. And there are existing checks in place if the government or the regulator consider those individuals to be unsuitable or hostile figures. And that's quite right. But I do think there's a distinction between that and a foreign power. That is a step that we've never taken as a country, and nor has any other democracy anywhere else in the world. And I think that would be deeply concerning. On the first point, what we're proposing here is not an out-and-out block. It is that there has to be sufficient support in Parliament for a takeover of this kind to proceed. And you're right to say that there are mechanisms and editorial board structures that can be put in place to try to ameliorate some of these concerns. But the history of those structures is not a wholly successful one. And a number of media figures, Andrew Neil, for example, long-standing and respected individuals within the industry who've looked back on those attempts in the past to insulate the editorial independence of newspapers and media organisations, have said that they simply haven't worked. So
you are absolutely convinced, are you, that this would be a state takeover? Whatever anyone says, Jeff Zucker or the other people involved with this, it is fundamentally, and whatever the legal framework that was put in place, it would mean that the Daily Telegraph and indeed the Spectator would say what Abu Dhabi wanted them to say. Is it as clear as that?
I don't think it's as clear as that. I don't think one could know with any certainty exactly what would happen and how much influence might creep into these particular newspapers or any others that might be subject to a foreign takeover in the future. I do think that there's a fundamental principle here, which is that freedom of the press matters, that public trust and confidence in their press matters enormously, particularly in the age we're living in, and that would be undermined if we went down this road.
There'd be a lot of people listening who say, that is a great principle. But we've already utterly undermined it. Because, I mean, if the Abu Dhabi consortium doesn't take over, it'll probably be taken over by Paul Marshall, won't it? An individual, a hedge fund billionaire who will do with it what he wants and have it say what he wants. The idea of this sort of free press in which people can say what they want, irrespective of the views of the owner, it just isn't right, is it?
Well, there's a history which you, as someone who's worked in the industry or the media or your whole life, knows very well of powerful individuals buying news outlets in part to create influence. And so I don't pretend that that is something entirely new. But I think that a government choosing to take a controlling stake in a newspaper or media outlet is new. We've never had that as a country. And as I say, no other country in the world has done that either. And I think that is a Rubicon that we should not cross. And what we in Parliament are saying, this very broad group of members of Parliament, over 100 individuals, the chairs of the relevant select committees from business, culture, foreign affairs, 5 political parties, is that that should be taken with great care. And if one did want to do it, then not only should the government and the regulator be content with it, but that Parliament itself should be given the opportunity to opine on it.
Yeah. You mentioned the breadth of support. I mean, it is broad, isn't it? I see Lee Anderson and Caroline Lucas.
Well, it's very rare that you get those two individuals to sign the same letter. You're absolutely right. But, joking aside, that does show, I think, that this is a matter that concerns all of us in Parliament, or a great deal of us, people of all political parties, those who care passionately about the Daily Telegraph as a newspaper, and those who perhaps don't, but care about the principle that is at stake. And if this were to proceed, what might happen in the future with countries taking an interest in our media that are wholly different to the UAE. The UAE is a country in which we have very good relations. It isn't a liberal democracy, but it is a country which is a partner, an ally of the United Kingdom. There are other countries out there who might follow suit if we enable this to happen. And so I think we should exercise great care before doing so.
Robert Jenrick, thank you very much.
It is now 21 minutes to 9. Last night, Birmingham City Council voted